be more creative? The creative process is just that, a process. Explore that process with award-winning novelist Michael Lister and other artists from a variety of mediums about having a more fulfilling and fruitful creative process.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
All right. My name is Jayson Kretzer. I do an all-ages comic book called Wannabe Heroes, as well as I do a little bit of comic writing for other publishers as well. And I do graphic design for the last 15 plus years. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm into. And you can find all that information at my website, JaysonKretzer.com. And that's Jason with a Y. Okay. So
cool. Tell us a little more about your comic. Your series.
It's called, Wannabe Heroes. It's an all-ages superhero action comedy comic. It kind of follows the life of six geeks. Is what we have a comic collector, a wannabe artist, which is like me. Ninja Bear, of course. Every group has a ninja. And these guys, they kind of develop unique powers, and they use them to battle bullies or kind of zany villains that pop up in their town.
And should we tell everyone that the Ninja Bear is based on me? Is that public knowledge?
Well, it's coming out in the sequel. We'll too much.
So JaysonKretzer.com. You said you've been doing graphic design work for about 15 years?
Yes, sir. Everything from car ads to I've designed whole campaigns for everything from political to restaurants or whatever. So.
Gotcha. Cool. Is that a way of supporting your art? And in doing that, are you your own patron? Is that your day job in order to be able to do your art?
A majority of my income comes from graphic design. And the cool thing is it allows me to have an office behind my house to work, and so when I'm not doing graphic design, I can jump in and work on my own personal projects.
Right. Cool. Is your goal to do just your projects one day?
Oh, absolutely. I think I want to create. I wouldn't be happy if somebody said, hey, you get to draw Amazing Spider-Man every month. I mean, that sounds like a dream job, but that's somebody else's character. My passion is creating stories and characters. So the goal is to provide income just off of that.
Gotcha. Cool. Now, I know you do a lot of cons, a lot of shows around, I guess, the South primarily.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about those and what you do at them and maybe some of the bigger ones you go to.
Yeah, I've been going to Orlando's MegaCon. That's one of the bigger ones I do. It's huge. 100,000 people walk through that show in a weekend. And the con circuit is really fun. You get to connect with other creatives that are trying to do the same thing you do, and a lot of times it'll lead to collaborations on the side that you didn't expect to get to do.
Right.
But I go as an artist. I set up a table. I do sketches live for people. They'll come up, request a character. Sometimes people will say, "Can you draw me as Captain America or whatever?" And that. So we do that as well. And then I use it as a way to sell my books. People come for the quick sketch, and they look at the books and other things, and it's just a way to help sell it.
Nice, very nice. Now, doing cons like that, is that primarily for promotion, or do you make money doing them? How does that actually work out?
Yeah, it works really well now. Like when I first started, it was hard to really justify going for money. I mean, it was all promotion. But now, especially in the con circuit I do about 7 to 8 cons a year. I do a lot of the same ones each year, and so I have repeat customers that come and they bring their friends to get a sketch or whatever. But now I actually make money. So, not a lot, but anywhere from, $500 to an extra $1,000 in a weekend on top of what I spend to go. And so it helps kind of supplement the trip a little bit.
Nice.
It's a little paycheck.
Very cool. While we're on cons, tell us about the con that you began How long ago was that? And we're talking about Creative Con, but tell everyone about that.
Creative Con started, it's 7 years ago now, with me and a friend of mine, Chris Arendt, who's a great guy, an editor at newsarama.com. He and I met at Chopsticks for lunch and said, you know what? We want one of these things in our town. And so we kind of put together a little one, which essentially was 6 artists sketching for free in the public library foyer. But over the years, it kind of picked up steam because we added some steam elements. I mean, we added more education element to it, and it's grown every year. And we're going into our 7th year at Gulf Coast State College. It'll be this September 17th and 18th, and we've added so much from prior years. We have a video game tournament. We have workshops of all types and tracks for creative folks. You know, which is everybody. I mean, right. Everybody's creative. You know, I think two of the things that bother me at shows a lot of times is people come up and they say, I wish I could draw like you, and, you know, I would give all, you know, whatever to be able to do that. And it's not like a magic thing that you just wake up and you can do. As you know, with your writing, it's something that you wake up and you do and you do and you do. And one day you're like, oh, I can do this pretty good now.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Definitely perseverance.
Well, Creative Con is an excellent conference, and it is our convention, whatever you would call it. But it has the educational element that I think is missing from most of the cons that I'm familiar with. And it's incredibly special to have something that good in Panama City, in our local area. And I really encourage everybody to attend. So September 17th and 18th. What's the website?
It is pccreativecon.com.
pccreativecon.com.
Yes,
cool.
sir.
All right, very good. Okay, you mentioned that you've been doing graphic design for about 15 years. I'm assuming that's professionally, you mean.
Right.
Can you tell me about how long you've been creating, how it started for you, how it developed? Was it in childhood, and you know, sort of how it began, this journey?
Absolutely. It definitely began in childhood, and as far as the drawing aspect, it came a little later, actually, because I've always lived with this crazy anxiety and fear that I'm not good enough to do what I do. And that, by the way, is always with me. But
let's pause on that just for a minute. I really appreciate you saying that, and that's you know, I think a lot of people will find that very helpful, because that's something that many, if not most, artists deal with. You know, is my work good enough? And the anxiety that accompanies it, because it's such a vulnerable thing to create something that comes out of you, and then you share it with the world. You put it out there for criticism, feedback, and ultimately either acceptance or rejection, and we all get both.
Oh yeah.
But it's a very brave thing to do. I think it's especially brave for those who are finding it anxiety producing, and you know, it's a fear. So I really appreciate you saying that, and I guarantee you that the vast majority of people listening to this, the other creatives that we're talking to, are going to relate to that. Oh, so yeah. How do you do it in spite of that? How do you do what you do in spite of anxiety, fear, insecurity, whatever you want to call it?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I can answer it great, but basically I didn't for years. I just did graphic design because it was safe. It was easy. I do what you want, and I get paid for that.
Right.
And it took my son being born before I put out my first comic book. Even though I've been drawing comic books since I'm 38 now, I was drawing comic books when I was 12, 13. We put out our first comic book in high school when I was 13 years old. I mean, it was just black and white, you know. It wasn't anything special, but I never shared it, and that continued on until. But basically, my son helped me get over that hump, and I still fight with it all the time. But I think you'll find if you know, there's stories and there's things inside you that just beat on you, and they wear you down if you don't let them out, and that's. Right. Ultimately, that beating started hurting me more than the fear. And so I had to let it out. So I don't know how you conquer it besides you get yourself a good support network, which I've been blessed to have, great friends, surround yourself with other creatives, other positive people, ultimately. And that helps a lot as well. So I don't know if that helps.
That's great. Do you, does it happen where you're like at an event, or is it usually like leading up to something or the launch of a new book or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's weird. Anxiety for me comes anytime or when I don't even expect it sometimes. I'll be sitting there at a con drawing sketches and I may not have any anxiety for that whole day, and then all of a sudden somebody will ask for some certain thing and I'm like, oh, and I freeze up and I'm like, I don't know, I've never drawn that before. And it's like, you've been drawing all day. What's the problem? My table mate that goes with me a lot of times, Andrew Pate, who's a colorist, always finds it, kind of fascinating the way that I beat myself up when people are like, "Oh, I love this piece, thank you so much," and they walk off, and I'm not happy about it.
Right.
But that came from childhood. I mean, I've just never been able to knock the anxiety part. So yeah, it just depends. It really can happen at any time.
And when you feel it happening, is there certain things you say to yourself, or is there anything you do? Do you take breaths? Do you have a mantra? Do you just push through it? How do you, when you feel it coming on, is there anything you normally do?
I just try to remind myself of every positive thing that's ever happened before. And then I'm a dreamer. I've always been a dreamer, which is not synonymous with producer, obviously. Sometimes you get caught in your daydreams and not produce. But I dream, kind of think about how cool it'll be once I do get it done, and if there's a positive response and somebody picks up the movie rights. I don't know.
Right.
But I kind of do that, and a dream always makes me feel better. So
excellent. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
okay.
I think it's by far more dangerous, I think, to be satisfied with what we create than to not be.
Right.
I think if we're not, and we think, I can do better, I can grow, I can evolve, and we continue to pursue that, then I think we will get better. Mm-hmm. I think if we think that what we do is great, we dash it off and send it out, and then we are deaf to criticism, or if the response is not good, we act like it's their problem, not ours. Then I think we don't grow. So that's excellent. All right, going back to how you began, you said it didn't begin with drawing, right? It was how did it begin?
I've always been a storyteller at heart. Like I was writing stories long before I was drawing them. But I had a couple of friends in school, and they were drawing, like, Ninja Turtles had just come out at the time, and they were drawing Ninja Turtles, and I was like, man, that looks so cool. I want to be able to draw. And I couldn't. So I created a story about something I could draw, which was a little leech. And if I had a piece of paper, I would draw it. But it's so simple, a leech. Who can't draw a leech? And I put little cartoony eyes on him and a bandana, and he was China Leech, which... Nice. It was based after the China Beach TV show that was on many years ago. So it was kind of a war leech. But the long story short, all my friends that were drawing with me that I looked up to and said, man, these guys are amazing in the 3rd and 4th grade, all of them by the time I graduated high school were done.
Yeah.
They had quit drawing, and I just didn't. And so I think you could argue they might have been more talented than me because they were better than me in the beginning. But if you're willing to work, I think you can get there. And that's kind of the message I try to tell people all the time is don't think that you don't have it in you, because you have it in you. Sometimes you just have to get all that crap that's on it off of you to be able to show it. So do 1,000 bad drawings and maybe, a decent one will pop out.
Right. That's right. Like in my line, it's, write 1,000,000 bad words
Mm-hmm.
throw them away, and then you've probably learned or on your way to learning how to be a writer.
Exactly.
I think there is something to be said for the persistence, the perseverance. The thing of I think that Malcolm Gladwell popularized about it takes 10,000 hours or 10 years to get really proficient at something, and creating art is no different. It's probably even more so that it takes just it's the saying I've always liked that said an author is a writer who didn't give up. And so those people who started and have ultimately stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
Those who ultimately stopped, that's where it ended for them. Whereas those who press on can turn into a career, turn into something very fulfilling in their lives. So it's a practice. It's a
Mm-hmm.
doing, and I am a better novelist today than I was, 22 years ago when I started, and you're a better storyteller, artist, creative, conference runner, comic book creator, everything. And both of us will be better 5 years from now, because we're not going to stop. We're not going to give up. We're not going to quit pursuing that thing, that excellence that's just right beyond our grasp.
Right.
So let's move into, since it is all about practice and process, let's talk about your process. So what I'd like to talk about now is not your process for the graphic design work you do for others.
Right.
Your creative process when you are inspired or when you are working on one of your comics or a project. Talk to us about your process.
Depending on the project, of course, I have different workflows. So on my Wannabe Heroes, for instance, I draw everything in the computer. Like I even do the freehand sketching in the computer. And I like to hit it in the morning when I can if I'm doing the freehand sketching, just the rough sketches, because that's when I find that I'm the most creative. And then at night, I can do my inking, which is after I've sketched, then I'll put a new layer on top of it, and then I refine the lines. Refining on inking is basically the equivalent of editing for writing to me.
Gotcha.
So the penciling is the same thing as getting that first draft out, and then after that, you got to come back in and refine it, and make the lines look good. So that's how I draw the comic. Writing the comic is is a little more different. I mean, you can see the board behind me. That is actually two of my planning boards. On one side is Creative Con, so that's whatever. But on the other side, the far side, is a short story that I'm writing for an anthology I'm producing with Tony Simmons and Mark Boston crew. But I will actually write scenes on the note card, and I basically use a skeleton story that I stole from How to Save a Cat or Save the Cat.
Yeah.
And he talks about kind of what all you want to have happen in the story, from where you want to state the theme to the dark night of the soul. Nothing ever necessarily follows that perfect pattern, or maybe I'm just not as good of a writer as he is. But I use that as a starting ground, and then as I create my scenes, I like putting them on the board because I'm so visual.
Right.
It helps me to look at that board, and I can kind of see it. Even though it's a comic, I kind of visualize it as a movie coming together, or a story. So you can kind of move the scenes around, and then after I get it from there, then I'll bring it over here and script it.
Nice. Yeah, that's an old screenwriter's technique for sure. The index cards on the corkboard.
And sometimes it may just be a picture, like a storyboard, because I'll storyboard a lot of times. And instead of even writing any words, I'll just draw a quick doodle, and I know what that is because that particular image I want to show up there or something.
Nice.
So
that's great. I don't think I have ever seen anyone do that for a short story. That's very cool that you have that much, that many story beats, that much detail for a short story.
This is a special short story, though, because this is a character from a novel that I've been working on for 10 years.
Nice.
So there's a lot to him, that they won't ever find out in the short story. But for me, that's a passion project that when I'm done with that book, and it's not a normal novel. I mean, it's like 3 novels put together. But when I'm done with that, I'm maybe done. That's my holy grail that I've been working towards, and I can't wait till it's finished. But every time I get close to getting ready to put a piece out, I find I'm much better than I was when I started, so I go all the way back to the beginning and start again.
Gotcha.
It's ridiculous. I don't advise anybody to do that. It's better to get it out and move forward and on to the next project. It's just for some reason that one I can't let go.
And we all, I think, have those type projects, where we can. There's other things that we do and put out while we're still working on this overarching,
Right.
larger thing. I think we do have that. You talked about working in the computer for the Wannabe
Right.
Heroes. What do you mean by that? Is it a pad that you're sketching on?
It is. It is absolutely a pad. And I don't know if this is going to be too jarring, but I can show you kind of. This is,
Excellent.
a digital pad, and I don't know where my pen is, but I'm able to draw straight on this, and you can kind of see I'm working on a page here from Wes Loker's Rocking Dead, which is a pretty fun post-apocalyptic zombie tale that follows this hair band that the lead singer doesn't realize the apocalypse is upon him. He just thinks that they're still rocking in the free world kind of thing. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Very cool. Now you said for your Wannabe Heroes, you definitely do that. Do you work a different way for other?
I do.
Jobs?
A lot of people, when I'm doing their story, they like to have the pages because it's a nice selling point to, after the book's out, you're going to run a Kickstarter or crowdsource, to have actual physical pages like this that he can offer as exclusive rewards. Like, oh, if you back at this, then you'll get an actual original art piece. And this is this is another page from that book. And what I've been doing is I sketch in the computer, then I print it out in blue line, and I don't know if you can see the blue in there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I ink over the top of it.
Nice.
And so it creates this, it's still crisp, because when I scan it back in, I drop all the blue out, and all you're left with is that black ink. So it's still real crisp, but it gives kind of an original piece of art that you can sell. And a lot of comic artists, they depend on that as supplement to their income, because if you're doing one comic a month, that's 22 pages. Say you're only getting $100 a page, well, that's $2,200 that month. But if you're able to sell each one of those original art pages, again, depending on how in demand that book is, if it's Spider-Man, those pages sell for $700 or $800 a piece.
Wow.
So you can sell 2 or 3 pages that month. Plus, then it's a nice month.
Yeah. Nice. Has your process changed over the years? Now, let's pick up for a minute, because you said when your son was born was when you were already working, but that's when you went public with it, right? That's when you decided to put it all together and put it out.
Yes, that's when I put out my first the printed comic book. I had been doing a web comic before then, and so I had been posting updates on the web comic for a while, but I had just never went that extra mile and printed a comic book.
Okay, so when did you start doing the web comic?
I started the web comic in 2009, probably.
Okay.
And it was the same name, Wannabe Heroes, but it was like 3 strips, like Sunday comics kind of feel, and just gag strips, and started that from nothing. Like, I just knew what I wanted to do, what the characters were, but I did no script. No, I didn't know who the character was going to be, but every week I did a new strip, no matter what was happening in my life, and I posted it. Forced myself to do that. That was kind of another one of those things of getting over the fear.
Nice.
Force yourself to do things you don't want to do, and then your future self will love you for it.
Right. Exactly.
But so that was I would draw that by hand and ink it by hand, then scan it in and color it, and then back before that I did everything by hand. So my my workflow always changes, and I think any artist should always at least attempt to change their workflow. If there's new tools that come along, instead of like, oh, I don't want to use that. Like my dad was that way with GPS. Like, no, I think I can find my way around. Like, embrace it, because sometimes it can make your work not necessarily better, but easier. And
Yeah.
if you can get something done faster, then that just means that's more work that you can produce.
Right.
So,
Excellent. Cool.
so I embrace the technology.
Nice. So, and when did the first print version come out?
Um, that's a good question. 3 years ago, late 3 years ago, and then we didn't put out. I didn't put out the second issue until last April, and then now the new issue is coming out this early summer. But I work with a colorist in the Philippines, and so I kind of go with her schedule. So we move at a little bit of a slower pace, which is fine, because we both have other projects we work on in the meantime.
And how did that relationship develop? How did you find a colorist in the Philippines?
It's, I I don't know. I mean, it's so perfect because I love her work with mine, and it's the only way I ever want to be here is to look. But I guess I just met her on like a DeviantArt website, which DeviantArt's just a like a Facebook for artists almost that started before Facebook. It seems like, and you could post your art and people can like and comment on it and stuff like that. And I found her work and I was just like, man, how much do you charge to color comics? And, you know, she gave me a great rate because I'm an indie guy. And all it took was 2 pages. And I said, please color this forever.
Nice.
And
Excellent.
so now I just work around her schedule and we get it done.
That's another, I mean, you mentioned technology earlier, but that's another way in which, you know, the world is so much smaller. Our connectivity is so much greater, and that you can collaborate with people all over the world. I mean, couldn't have done that just a few years ago.
No,
Or it would have been much more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I love it. I'm able to sell art all over the world. I've done, because one thing we hadn't mentioned, I did trading cards for about 4 years, and I was able to do them for Topps and Upper Deck, working on licensing such as Star Wars, Marvel, Adventure Time, Archer, all those, and I was able to do all those contracts while sitting in this office, you know, and there's no way I could have dreamed that possible when I was in high school.
Right.
I thought, oh, you have to be living in New York City.
Right.
So here I am.
Now tell us how that came about, the cards, and do you still do them?
I decided to stop doing them last year. My goal was to do a Star Wars set. I'd never worked on a Star Wars license. I'm like, if I can ever do this, I'm going to get out of the cards. Because the cards, I love them, but they're not telling a story. You're drawing a card, and the deadlines are pretty harsh. You're drawing sometimes 100 cards, and, 30 days you're doing 3 or 4 cards a day. And the pay's not great. So, but it's a really good way to get your name out there. And how it started was I used to donate art to a guy that worked at the March of Dimes, the main March of Dimes up north. And he ended up starting his own trading card company. And he remembered me from donating art. And he's like, hey, man, how about I pay you to do some trading cards? And it just... Once I did a few, then I was able to build a portfolio off that and start submitting and to the big guys, and they let me on, and that's how it went.
That's
Lucky.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I've been thinking a lot lately about the process of planting seeds, sowing seeds, and what happens later. And what we're experiencing today are because of seeds that were planted years ago, both that we did, like in our country, going all the way back to the very beginning, good and bad, the rough harvest of bad seeds and the good things that we enjoy. And you giving that work, donating that work was planting a seed. and it came back to that incredible. That's wonderful.
I'm a big believer in that, and what's really kind of unique, I don't know if it's funny, but I did all that with March of Dimes, and then when we had our son, he came 7 weeks premature, and March of Dimes was, some of the technology that they developed is what helped him get out of the NICU.
Nice.
I mean, so it's really cool circle. I always recommend artists to give to charitable causes, and it'll come back.
That's awesome. Yeah, I so believe in that. I know a lot of artists, have the perception that the general population believes that art should be free and they should give everything away, and so they're trying to balance. Hey, my art is worth you buying and paying for, and so there is that balance. But I so believe in that in '97 when my first novel was published, I started giving books away. Every year I do a big holiday book giveaway, and I've almost reached 1 million books given away over that time. And I hope it'll be several million more. And some of the greatest things have happened because of that. It's incredible. So there is a wonderful thing about giving, and you can't outgive, I don't think. I think it always comes back, We touched on this a little bit, but I was going to ask you about if you had a set-aside space to create in. Obviously you do. Can you tell us a little bit about your space there?
This is actually an office that sits out behind my house, and when me and my wife, we used to have a 2-bedroom townhouse that we had bought, and I had one of the rooms in it, and which meant we couldn't have kids because I'm very adamant I got to have my space. Right. So when we started looking for houses, we looked at a lot of really cool houses, and we stepped in this house, and everything was great. And then I looked in the backyard and saw this office, and I was like, I'm sold. You can have, it has a pool, which she wanted the pool. I did not want a pool. I still do not want a pool. Let that be on the record.
Duly noted.
This office is perfect for everything I need. It gets me out of the house, which I think can be important sometimes, especially if you have kids and pets and things. And it gives you a place to come and shut the door and go to work, because that's, no matter if you're freelance or what, you still have to go to work. You have to, if you think it's just going to magically happen by working 1 or 2 hours on Saturday, I mean, that's unfortunate, because it's going to take a lot of work. So, anyway.
And tell us, earlier you moved the camera. Can you move the camera a little bit and show us the whole room? Can you give us a little?
It's super messy. I set up this poster here just to cover my refrigerator.
Nice.
There's a little refrigerator hid back there. That's cool. For, if I need a beer or something. Front door has one of my wannabe heroes. And then I have some recording equipment because we did podcasts here as well. And my printer. But it's a small, it's not a big space. But it gets, I got my Miller Lite neon sign. My father retired from Miller Brewing Company a couple of years ago and moved back into town. So he brought that to me. But yeah, it's it doesn't take much, and I'm a cluttery person. So.
It's what we're talking about is process, and just in looking at your space, you can see your process. You see it on the wall. You see it on the desk. You see it on the monitor. That's all process.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things I keep real close to me, even though we live in a world of Google. I still keep, which I think you'll appreciate this, I still keep this guy right beside my desk. Nice. The stuff. Because if I'm writing, last thing I like to do is have to Google something, some grammatical thing, because then it can lead me down a dark hole, and next thing you know, I'm watching the new Captain America Civil War trailer.
Right.
But I keep all my comic book reference books straight above me. So if there's something that I want to look at, dynamic figure drawing or something, I can just whip it down, get some inspiration, and keep moving.
Nice. That leads into my next question, which is, can you tell us some of the artists that you admire that have inspired you or influenced you? And do you happen to know anything about their process?
Let's see. I know that as a young kid, I was always inspired by Disney. Who wasn't? But also Jim Davis, who drew Garfield, believe it or not, is a huge inspiration on me because I didn't get comics as a kid. My parents weren't real savvy on me reading X-Men, so I did get to read the comics in the paper almost every day, and everybody's had this kind of sketchy style, but Jim Davis had this really clean ink drawing style, and that has helped to develop in what I do. If people have seen my work next to other comic artists' work, they're like, "Oh, wow, you!" It looks like more like coloring book style. You know, I've heard people say that, but I like it clean, and it came from that. And I just know that he worked pretty hard in the beginning to get it going, drawing every single day. And so I tried to do that. Comic artist, a guy named Arthur Adams, who I finally met after idolizing him for 25 years. I met him in Charlotte last year at Heroes Con. Just a fantastic guy. He doesn't have to draw as hard now as he used to. But he's more of a traditional guy. You know, he draws and then he inks it, and he's very meticulous. A lot of detail, just amazing stuff. But those are like as far as their artwork goes. And then when it comes to the books, there's a couple of guys that I like to mention. Scott McCloud. He writes what's that? It's called it's just like drawing for comics, or but he writes. It's not written in book form. It's written in comic form. And so it's really good stuff. He also invented the 24-hour comic book day, which is now like a national comic holiday that we all celebrate. So understanding comics, that's what it is. And so it's a great book to read if anybody's interested in that. And then Bern Hogarth, who is one of the best anatomy artists that I think exists. And from what I read about him, I've never met him, but he went to school to be a doctor, and through studying the anatomy, he started realizing he's really awesome at drawing. So he put together all these books called Dynamic something, so Dynamic Anatomy, Dynamic Hands and Feet, and they're just books full of him showing you how to draw all that stuff in the right place.
Nice.
Anyway.
Very cool.
It's good enough. I'm long-winded when it comes to, all that stuff.
That's excellent. I mean, we all need inspiration and other creatives that we can be the apprentices of, even if we never meet them. Even if we're not in direct contact or we're not working in the same office they are. But I mean, the books on my shelves are so many of my teachers, and masters that I'm the apprentice of, so that's very cool. I'm going to ask you a question, and this is completely out of my ignorance, but you mentioned sketching, maybe in the morning, and then at night you might ink, right? There's a sketch, and then the ink is where you're really like making it finalize the right. Okay.
Right.
Do some comic book artists then are they also the colorist? And have you ever done that? Is there a reason why you don't? How do you make that decision?
Absolutely. In the sketching is technically referred to as penciling. I always say sketching, but they say so. There's a penciler, an inker, and a colorist in most comics. And the reason they divide those jobs is just for speed. A lot of artists can do all three, but if I could pencil it and then get somebody else to do the inks and colors, I can move on to the next thing. So that's kind of why they separate it. And I have done. Okay, let me get the words out of my mouth. Lizel Buenaventura is my colorist for Wannabe Heroes. She's the first person that ever colored my work. I always colored my work before then. And really, I didn't trust anyone to color it. Not that I don't think that they could do it. It's more that fear. It's like I didn't want to send them unfinished artwork. I was like, let me finish it myself. But once I saw how amazing it felt to collaborate, now I wouldn't have it any other way. Now I love sending my lines to someone else to let them color, and the way that they see the scene completely changes, and it's fantastic. I really enjoy the act of collaborating now. So
Nice. Very cool. Do you think you'll do it again? Like, would there be another project that you would do that you would actually do all three steps?
Probably not a full project, but I do enjoy doing just posters or book covers a lot of times. I'll just do it all myself because it's a one shot. But if it's, most comics are anywhere from 20 to 24 pages long, the idea of penciling, inking, and coloring that, it takes so long. So I prefer not to color again. And plus, coloring has changed so much. People still paint a little bit, but for the most part, people use Photoshop and a lot of technical tools. Not to say that coloring isn't still artistic, because it totally is, but it's a lot of skill-based stuff now. You can really move fast if you have the skill for it. So I'll let people that are more skilled at that do that.
So you would send her your images, the inks, or whatever you call them, in say a big file, and then she works in Photoshop to color them. Is that
Absolutely?
Cool.
Yes, I'll send her just a 300 DPI TIFF file, and she colors it. Everything's put together, and then she sends it back to me colored, and then I letter on top. Which lettering is just putting in the word balloons, the sound effects, and all that. So I basically, I could do all of that myself, but it just like I say, it's actually more fun for someone else to do it because it becomes better when you allow people to collaborate sometimes.
right? Do you, in terms of the words, in terms of the telling of the story, do you write the words first, draw the pictures first? Is it different times?
It actually is different times. I always start with writing the words, though. It's just they change a lot of times. When my pencil hits the paper, sometimes they change. Sometimes it's because I find a much better way to tell it in the art, and it's better to show and not tell, obviously in comic books, but sometimes I just say, man, I can't draw that. I'm going to have to come up with another way to attack this that's going to look cool. But always the dialogue changes. I talk to myself when I write dialogue. I'm sure a lot of people do. But especially when you have a comic page and you're looking at these guys' faces, they can tell you what they're going to say. You may think you wrote it, but once you see their face, the expression, the way it comes out, all that changes. So I don't fall in love with anything when I'm writing comics because it can all change.
Nice. Just a couple more questions to wrap it up. The first is about time management. Tell me how you balance your day job, your family, wife, children, social, whatever, relationships, responsibilities, and then finding time to create.
The time management's always been a weakness. Just because I tend to sacrifice, I used to tend to sacrifice my passion for creating first, because I knew I had family comes first, then work, and then this, and creating came way back in the back. And to be perfectly honest, I just wasn't happy. I was not happy for years doing that, and my wife is super supportive about it. And so now I get that creative time. Not as much as I want necessarily, but I have a certain amount that I have first. And if the car ad don't get done, then so be it. Because all that stuff will get done, is the idea. I mean, you don't want to sacrifice your family, but I listened to a podcast about the lady that wrote Eat, Pray, Love, or whatever. Yeah, she...
Elizabeth Gilbert, I believe.
Yes, she has an amazing podcast about creating magic. And I heard her say on there that one of the ladies said, that she has to take that creative time, because if she doesn't, then her family, she can't be what her family needs her to be without that time. If she can't spend that time in the office, and I completely feel that. If I can't be out here, my family don't even want me around. Like, you need to go do something, be happy, come back, and so that's what I do. So I set aside time for creative and family first, and then the paid stuff, the car ads, the graphic design, you'll get that done because you have to. But you won't get your creative stuff because you have to. At the end of the day, if you've waited at the end of the day to get it, you'll go to bed. And that's what I did. I would go to bed but if I got to do that car ad before in the morning, I'm like, well, I got to do it.
Right.
I'll go do it. So that's my only advice on time management is plan for creative time first, or at least second right behind family. But
and if you don't carve that out, no one else will. I mean, you have to carve it out. You have to protect it. You have to see it as sacred, honor it. And if you do that, then those around you will begin to do the same thing. But if you don't respect it, if you don't take care of it, how could you expect them to? You know, I mean, it's amazing. I really appreciate your time and sharing with us your process and your creative life. Would you take just a second to remind everybody where they can find you online? And I'll maybe spell both names, although I'll put it up as well. And then about Creative Con again.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I thank you for asking me to do this. It's fun chatting with a fellow creative, especially one like you. I look up to a lot. So basically, you can find me on my website. It's Jayson Kretzer, JaysonKretzer.com. And Creative Con is PCCreativeCon.com. And that'll be September 17th and 18th. 2016 at Gulf Coast State College. We'll be celebrating and exploring creativity and creative career paths together. So
nice.
I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you, man. I love you. I love your work. I love what you're doing for our community. And thank you again. And we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Later.